Hello and welcome to the Thinking Fellows podcast. My name is Caleb Keith, and today I am joined by Scott Keith, Bruce Hillman, and Adam Francisco. Today we're going to talk about Islam. And so for those of you in the know, you know this is a Adam Francisco episode of the Thinking Fellows podcast. You can find out more about the Thinking Fellows and what we do over at 1517.org and by going over to 1517 on YouTube. If you check out the new videos there, you'll see these in 15 minutes or less topical videos that are, as you guessed it, 15 minutes or less. And they are the same subject matter as these Thinking Fellows episodes. We're doing them in parallel so that if you want a quick hit of information, you just have a little bit of time and you want to watch something on YouTube, you can go find that there and have an appropriately long video. And then if you want to find out more, you want to listen to a full length conversation on that, you can listen here at the Thinking Fellows podcast. So we hope you enjoy those. Go subscribe to 1517 on YouTube now if you haven't already. All right. So our broad topic is Islam. There are a couple of subtopics here that I have in mind, especially as we're sort of forming the idea for what Adam and I will do for the in 15 minutes or less. Adam suggested this, of course.
Well, because we're looking for topics.
Do you have a book on this or something that you need to sell? Like, what is going on?
Come on. It's just,
Well, that's a miss.
Forthcoming.
Forthcoming.
You do.
Right?
Yeah. What kind of sword? It's a historic.
Right.
It's Luther, Islam, that kind of stuff.
Way to sell books. I mean, kind of.
Well,
I mean, there's like one.
I mean, it's not on Islam. It's on Luther's, how he handled the, I'll just say the Ottoman Turkish jihad into Central Europe.
I'm going to send Adam to my How to Sell Books course.
Yeah.
You should definitely put one on for him.
Yeah.
But his suggestion was the theology of Islam. Now that seems like really broad. It seems like a course that he could teach over a semester. I'm sure
He's taught that course.
I bet he has taught that course. But the question or overarching question I think is important is, what do Christians need to know about the theology of Islam or Islam in relation to Christian theology? And a couple of reasons for that pop up. Obviously, the growing tide of Islam in the world and just in the West in general too, through various forms of immigration. Westerners live alongside Muslim communities nowadays in like even specific areas. Like the famous example in the United States, and I'm sure there's more than this, is Dearborn, Michigan, I think, right? Which is like got like a full Islamic government even. Or like city council that's all now that way. And so it's definitely interesting. Or another big example today is London. And just there's growing major cities in the West that are dealing with this. But then as a Christian, I've seen a rise in Islamic apologetics against Christians. And so I kind of think it's worthwhile that Christians know what they might get hit with, in a sense, and how to respond. This was actually something I saw sort of like for the first time meaningfully impact somebody a couple of years ago when actually, Adam, we were talking about what happened with your back, but I think this is why you could, why I filled in for you at Camp Arcadia, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was that 2 years ago? And that
I was laying in the ICU, paralyzed from the waist down. It was a wonderful experience.
And
Terrifying,
I for a couple of evenings, sat down with a high schooler who had some sort of assurance questions generally about Christianity that I sat down with him. But then when we got to the heart of the matter, I found out that he had a Muslim friend at school who had been really pressing him about Christianity and sowing doubt in his mind about Christianity. So I do think for some people this is already here, and for more of us this is already coming. So I'll at this point hand it over to you, Adam. Why or what do Christians need to know about Islam, or do you have anything to add to that part of it? And then what's the outline here for addressing this theology of Islam?
Well, there's a lot of things. If you gave me 15 weeks, I'd say, but if you give me 15 seconds to maybe 45 seconds, I'd say one thing is regarding Islam. Islam, like Christianity, is a universal religion in that the Quran, Islamic theology, presents itself as a religion designed for all people. In fact, the Quran says that all things are essentially Muslim. It's just that human beings, and also there's these things called the jinn, like genies. Not my running joke is not Bombay Sapphire Martini gin, but genies have free will, and they are humans. All of us are, according to Islam, by nature Muslim. It's just that we suppressed that, right? So Muslims will usually refer to people who come from any tradition, whether it's Christian or whatnot, to Islam as not converts but reverts, reverting back to the original nature. So there's that. And then for Christians, especially in particular, I think that's okay grammar there. Islam sees itself as either a replacement of Jewish and then the Christian religion. You can you get that sense in some passages in the Quran, but the more traditional understanding is that Islam is a restoration of a religion that has been around since the time of Adam, Noah, Abraham, the rest of the patriarchs and prophets, that's been corrupted and evolved or grown into like the religion of Judaism or the religion of Christianity. And so when Muhammad comes around in the late 6th, early 7th century, that is by Allah's design to restore the religion he once delivered through all the prophets before Muhammad, and to universalize that religion. And the term is Sharia, the way of life that's best represents the will Allah has for humans as they live here on Earth.
Can I make a suggestion?
Maybe.
For the show.
To Islam or to?
No, I think we should do like rapid fire question to Adam on Islam, and just have him we can go around the circle and be like, here's my question, here's your question, to give Adam I don't know, a minute or so on each one, just rapid fire, so that we kind of get through. Because I would argue
him chug that coffee after you brought this idea up.
The three of us don't know that much about Islam. And so our questions are probably most people's questions.
Sure.
And so we would kind of get through what people want to know about Islam if we kind of just rapid fire Adam some questions. And I'd like to start.
Well, it sounds like you've hijacked the episode, so go for it.
Yeah.
Okay, Adam, who was Muhammad?
Who was Muhammad?
Muhammad.
Well, good question. He's from the Islamic perspective, he was born AD 570, thereabouts, 40 years of age, 610 AD. The story goes that he's in a cave during the month of the 9th month in the Arab calendar. It's called Ramadan. And he starts to hear a voice, feels a presence. Some sources even suggest the cave was lit up by light. And he's basically, the way that's interpreted, he's called to be a prophet for Allah. In the Islamic tradition, Allah being the creator of everything. And then up until his death in 632, he will, in a way, progressively, the way it's interpreted, be the bearer of Allah's progressive revelation to the Arabs, but with an eye to the world. That is, that this message is going to, through a struggle, Arabic for struggle is jihad, going to bring it to the rest of the world in future generations. So the way the Quran treats Muhammad, it doesn't name him all that often. It's like a handful of times, but it refers to him in chapter 30 as the seal of prophethood. He is the last of the prophets, beginning with Adam, who brings Allah's message to their community. But what's unique about Muhammad is his mission is universal. All the previous prophets was particular to a people. Like, for example, the Quran refers quite a bit to Jesus. His name in the Quran is Isa, and he is seen as a prophet of Israel Um, and in fact, he says of himself when he's like about an hour old in chapter 19 of the Quran that he is a prophet of Allah. But his mission is constrained to the people of Israel. Muhammad is for the whole world. Is that enough? I could go more. I mean, there's
Can I
lots
ask
of
a
stuff.
follow-up
That's
question?
good.
You
Did
may.
Muhammad write the Quran?
He did not. So the Quran is a book that emerges about 20 years after Muhammad's death. It is understood by Orthodox Muslims to contain everything that Muhammad spoke by inspiration, if you will. That's not the language Muslims will use, but the theory is that an angel, Jabril, would periodically from 610 to 632 AD bring down words that Allah instructed him to bring down to have Muhammad speak to the people. That's relevant to the particular occasion. And then when Muhammad dies, because there were people around who were memorizing everything Muhammad said, because there were signs that he was being inspired. He would oftentimes like fall to the ground and start maybe even convulsing, almost like he was having seizures, I guess. If memory serves me correctly, there's a source that says that he would even kind of foam at the mouth a bit. So there have been accusations over the centuries that he was an epileptic, that he was demon possessed, and so on. But from the Islamic frame of reference, that's how people knew when he was speaking under the influence, if you will, and they would memorize everything he said. Some people would even write down some of the things he said. And after he's dead, about 20 years, those people, they're on the front lines of the effort to expand the reach of Islam. And so a decision's made that in order not to lose the Quranic revelation, that it should be written down. So around 650 AD, the Quran is put into book form. There's a curious history with the Quran. I don't want to go into all the details, but you'll oftentimes hear Muslims refer to it as a perfectly preserved text. That it's a perfect preservation of what Allah wanted to speak through Muhammad. And then when it's written down, if you could, like in Bill and Ted's Time Machine, I guess, take a Quran from 650 AD and carry it along with Muhammad, you'd see that there's no difference. And then they go a little further, though, not a little, a lot further, and say that every time the Quran has been copied through the centuries, it's been copied in a perfect way such that no variants appear and so on. Interesting thing here is, though, if you look at the manuscripts, they're not all that huge in terms of content, but there's quite a few variants. In fact, early on, there's a reference to the composition of the Quran is once it's put down, people disagreed that was the actually a perfect preservation what Muhammad said. And so they go back to the drawing board, and when a text is finally put together, they get rid of all the other texts that don't agree with it, just to start with one standard one. But even then, right away, even in the 7th century, there's these complaints that there are different readings of the Quran, so 7 at first and then 14, and it gets worse through the centuries.
That always makes me think. So, like, I think it was, I don't know, maybe it was last year. This is all blend together. But we did an episode where we talked about one of the strengths of Christianity was that that Christians are totally able to lean into the copyist errors in the manuscripts and the preservation of manuscripts with like historical reality in them, and that's a strength, because the reality is people are going to find manuscripts where a consonant is shifted or missing, or there's a lack of punctuation, or there's these minor changes or copyist errors or whatever. And it's not crumbling to the whole religion. What does a religion like this do? I don't know, academically, apologetically, especially now that it's like, you can take a course in Islam at probably any major university now too. When you do that for Christians, a professor is apt to point out all of the quote errors in our manuscripts and talk about Christianity or the Old Testament as fiction and myth. What does Islam do academically when that's a reality, but the tenet of the religion is that can't be true?
Yeah, well, on the popular level, that's the way it is. It just can't be true. But
Okay.
for, I would say, probably centuries is not inaccurate. There have been Muslim scholars, I think, going all the way back to like probably one of the more famous ones, Ibn Taymiyyah. They will take note of some of these variants, and sometimes it's referred to as just a different reading, meaning it corresponds to like a different dialect of Arabic. Like, for example, the first chapter of the Quran has this phrase referring to Allah as the Maliki Yawmiddin. And then there's other readings of that just have a short A, like Maliki Yawmiddin. So it's like little things that could be just attributed to dialectical variants. But that's still hard to maintain. If you have like a real robust doctrine of the inerrancy of the Quran, such that even the copyists are perfectly preserving everything, it ought to, at least in theory, upset things a bit. I remember maybe about 20 years ago now, the New York or Wall Street Journal ran an article about this German scholar, not a Muslim, but she was a scholar of the Quran who was working on putting together a critical edition of the Quran.
Oof.
That it would have the Arabic text, and then you'd have footnotes or a critical apparatus, that would make note of the different variances or variants in the manuscripts. And it was supposed to come out shortly after that article was run, and it still has yet to come out. Word on the street is that it would, the threat of violence releasing something like that has paused. That doesn't mean there aren't scholars, including Muslim scholars, who look at that, like the way Christians do at different manuscript traditions. So for well, I don't know if you want to get into that at all, but if you think of like the number 666, the mark of the beast, right? We know it's 666 because Iron Maiden has a song about it, but and it's in most of the manuscripts. But the earliest manuscript of Revelation that we have, like 2nd or 3rd century, has the number 616. And so they wrestle with that. Like, how is it that you have that? And there's lots of explanations. Well, there are explanations that make it where you can understand why something like a scribal tradition might differ. But some Muslims do similar things, but their doctrine of inerrancy, I don't know if they don't really use the term inerrancy. It's perfect preservation of the text is much more, what's the word? Maybe ideological than, say, the Christian doctrine of inerrancy that says the original autographs are inerrant. It's just the copyists totally expected over the course of 1,500 years of copying it. There's going to be variants. There's going to be scribal mistakes, misspellings, John's name sometimes with the one new or N, sometimes with two, and so on. Not a big deal in terms of the doctrine or the historicity of the text. We don't have a doctrine of perfect preservation like in Islam. So I could go on and on, but I'm not gonna.
Bruce, you have a question?
Obviously.
I have lots of questions. So I just get one right now.
Of course he does.
Just go on. Round robin, baby.
It's so hard. Okay, I guess I'll start with one that I anticipate people who are new to thinking about Islam might have, which is Allah is Arabic for God, right?
Yeah.
But do you
more precisely the God? Yeah.
Right, the God. Muslims consider Allah to be the true God, the one God, and also the God of Israel and the Christians. But from a Christian perspective, do you see Allah as the same deity, just misunderstood, or a completely different deity?
Good question.
I want to quickly jump and say it's the latter, but I want to maybe have a little more nuance in that. So clearly, if you read the way the Quran describes Allah, very clearly it's not the God of Christianity. God is one according to the Quran. He cannot have a son. Think of it, Islamic conception or doctrine of God is a Unitarian monotheism. That has zero room for a trinity. There's in chapter 4 of the Quran, I think around verse 170, 171, even warns Christians in particular from saying tathlitha or confessing the doctrine of the Trinity. So even from the Islamic vantage point, there's a clear distinction between the Islamic God and the Christian God. On the other hand, and this is not me having a liberal moment, just trying to think about this in light of Romans 1 and 2, all people have basic natural knowledge of God. It's just, Luther in the Large Catechism even refers to the Turks and Jews as, he says something to the effect of, even though the Jews and the Turks conceive of one true God, and there's a lot of linguistic debate whether there should be a definite article there or not, like the one true God, or just like they conceive of there being one true God. They don't know him because they do not know Jesus Christ. So like on a more practical level, Muslims have some basic natural knowledge of God like all people. But the problem immediately, though, is once you start filling in all that gray area, and it's like a whole bunch of gray area with the Quranic view of God, it's immediately not the one true God. Does that make sense? Is that too liberal, Bruce or Scott? I should ask you.
No, I would agree with you. I think that, the whole Muslim argument you said earlier was sort of like all the texts in Judaism and Christianity have been corrupted, but it's the same God. So the God we believe in is not the true God really anymore because we've corrupted him. But from the Islamic perspective, it's always been the same God. But I find from the Christian perspective, I like your distinction. Like I've always thought, well, they're referring to the same, we're all referring to the same concept, but it's not functionally or actually truthfully the same deity. You've turned, they've turned him into a non-triune.
And don't you think for us, Bruce, that could be like, that's definitely related to the second commandment and like misusing the name of God, and like you can misuse the name of God as to actually do witchcraft and like to call upon demons and to do all sorts of other.
Ooh, you had to go there, huh?
Yep.
Jiminy Christmas.
Oh.
Yeah, you can count on him.
Make Adam's
But usually not recording.
Okay.
All right, is it my turn?
Is it?
turn.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So
I feel like I need to put up my guard here, like taking a jab across a hook, uppercut.
We should accuse him of being like bring accusation questions.
if God in Allah in Islam is just one God, cannot have a son.
Mm-hmm.
Yet you say the Quran mentions Jesus many times. If he's not God, then what or who is Jesus in the religion of Islam?
Yeah, this is one of those big questions Christians always have. When Christians read the Quran for the first time, one of the things that surprises them a lot of times is how many times Jesus is mentioned, that Mary, she's the only female named in the Quran, is treated as a virgin who gives birth to Jesus. Jesus performs miracles in the Quran, including breathing on these clay pigeons, or a clay pigeon, I guess it is. Not the stuff you shoot with a shotgun,
bang, bang.
But like a trinket, or something like that, and it all of a sudden comes to life.
Magic trick Jesus.
What's really interesting, or what Christians ought to know about the Muslim view of Jesus, at least from the Quran, is it treats Jesus as nothing more than a man. He's fully man, which we'd say he's fully man, but he is not, according to the Quran, fully God. To suggest that Jesus is the Son of God, one with the Father, or something like that, is what the Quran and Muslim tradition would call shirk, associating a partner with God. So and that is the one unforgivable sin in Islam. The Quran says that even though it regards Jesus as just a man, he is a prophet. He says, this is chapter 19, it's in the verse 30s of the Quran. There's Jesus' first miracle is speaking from the cradle. He's born to Mary. She's underneath a palm tree. She puts him in a cradle. The context seems to be that Mary is like distraught because here she is not married, she's a virgin, and she has a child, and she's going to go back home, and she's got to explain things. And Jesus looks up at her and says, "All will be well, Mary, for I am a prophet of Allah." So he's just a man. He is however, at the same time, a prophet. He does do some remarkable things in the Quran. It says chapter 5 of the Quran has him, or actually, let's go back to chapter 4. It says that he was not crucified, nor did he die. Instead, he was taken up. And the way that's usually explained is that, though there's variations to this, that Judas was crucified in Jesus' place by accident, or maybe because Judas' face was transformed to look like Jesus, and Jesus sort of was just taken up into heaven. And
the ultimate gotcha. You thought you were betraying me, but haha.
Yeah. I mean, there's other explanations that say that poor Simon the Cyrene. When Jesus is carrying the cross or the cross beam,
he
just mix up, and Simon, I guess, looked a bit like Jesus, so poor Simon gets crucified instead of Jesus. Then Jesus sort of slips away. But the Quran, it's not well developed, but does say that Jesus is taken up into the heavens, and there's several layers to heaven, and he's been staying there, hanging out there, even to this very day, though he's just merely a human. And he will return. Chapter 5 of the Quran suggests, this is around the verse 100 and teens. I think it's 117, 118, somewhere thereabouts. And the picture is the last day, and everybody gets raised from the dead or from the living in the last day and is judged or stands before Allah on the day of judgment. And Jesus returns or comes back. And it's like Allah is pointing to the Christians in particular. And I've got another running joke here. You ready for it? And and there's like a group of LCMS Lutherans who think they're the only ones among the Christians. But he's looking at all the Christians, and he says to Jesus, it's funny.
Oh, okay.
I like it. I'm not very humorous, but I have these standard jokes that I tell, and they used to get a lot of laughter. They don't get it anymore, sadly, but I'm not creative enough to come up with new ones. But so Jesus looks at the Christians, or God or Allah looks at the Christians and says or asks Jesus, did you tell them, Christians, to take you and your mother Mary as lords besides Allah? So it's an interesting misunderstanding of the Trinity, perhaps. But you do have Jesus in the Quran disowning Christianity in a way. So then elsewhere in the Quran it says at that last, or the day of judgment, that's when Jesus finally, because he's just a mere human, will die, but he will quickly rise again from the dead, just like all people. And then there's some interesting traditions about what Jesus does on the very last days, in the other literature in Islam called the Hadith, but we don't need to go into that. Yeah, unless you want a whole bunch of hate comments in our YouTube channel, Caleb.
I mean, will it get us traffic?
Yeah, are they viewers?
Well, it might, but I don't know if you want to. The hate you'll experience is pretty profound. I found that out on the On the Line podcast. So
nice. Is it my turn?
Yeah. I don't.
You feel satisfied with your answer? Okay.
I mean, it was good enough.
Do you want more?
No. Man, I have a couple, but this one I feel like is relevant. So, I find that one of the common things you kind of hear about Islam today is it like you don't really have to worry about the extreme fundamentalist religious side of it, or like that might just be, like in the Middle East or particular countries or some communities in the West and in the United States, they know how to deal with it. But I'm curious, what's the common thread for like between the secular Muslim and your Orthodox believing Muslim? Just as I would say there is one for like, I know it's a weird term, but like they exist now. Like your secular Christian, your person who, doesn't really believe in inerrancy, but would kind of say they're a Christian, and then your fundamentalist or Orthodox or confessional Christians. There often is a common thread. Like
Richard Dawkins says he's a cultural Christian now.
Yeah, exactly. Like he would say probably like Christianity offers like an ethnic that has like dignity for all people, even non-Christians. I think conservative confessional Christians are going to believe that, and your most liberal or your most, cultural Christian type person is going to believe that too. And I think that's true for all of these universal religions. Like you have secular Jews and you have all the way to various Orthodox sects, and there's some common thread there that people want to hang on to that. What's the common thread with your secular Muslim to your Orthodox Muslim, and does it matter for Christians, especially like as you have more and more of these secular or moderate Muslims around?
Yeah, well, unlike say like secular Judaism or secular Christianity or secular Christians and secular Jews, what we might describe as a secular Muslim still has a theology. So you like when you're, this is, especially, well, in the case of Richard Dawkins, cultural Christian, he doesn't believe in God, or a lot of secular Jews don't believe in God. In Islam, though there are Muslims who will use the term secular Muslim, like think of like the whole country of Turkey is, at least historically, before President Erdogan has started making some of these changes, identifies itself as a secular Muslim country. And what they meant by that was that there's a separation between mosque and state. But there's still this fundamental belief that there is a God. So I would say that the common beliefs across Muslims, whether they're secular or Orthodox or Shia or Sunni or Sufi, is first and foremost, there's 5 of them. Some would tack on a 6th. First and foremost, that there is one God. It's the doctrine Tawhid, and it's more than just confessing there's one God, but that you should make God one in your life. Second is that in some way, shape, or form, Allah is the creator of all things visible and invisible. Now,
And in one Lord Jesus Christ. Oh, I'm sorry.
They should, but they don't. They reject it, and that's where it all goes wrong. That doesn't mean Muslims today don't have debates that sort of parallel the debates within Christianity about the nature of creation, like a theistic evolution or a young earth and everything in between. They do have those debates. The third and
Wasn't
fourth...
William Lane Craig's main thesis based off a Muslim idea on philosophy and creation?
The Kalam cosmological argument. It's more Arab.
Yeah.
It's more like traditional Arabic philosophy. Okay. That can be also, there's Arab Christians. Anyway, so those are the first 2 central ideas that are those are maintained across the board. There's the third and fourth are kind of go hand in hand. A strong belief that there is this lineage of prophets, Muhammad being the ultimate, and everything else in a way being kind of penultimate. And along with that, some of these prophets produced scripture or books. The Quran refers to the Torah, the Psalms of David, and the Injil, usually translated or always translated gospel. That there's one mention of this. Here's one more joke. I don't know if this is all that funny though.
Oh boy, here we go.
A reference to the Suhuf or the scrolls of Abraham. Right, and here's the joke. Where are those things? The Mormons, the Mormon Quad, the Book of Mormon, Doctrine and Covenants, and Pearl of Great Price has a Book of Abraham. Maybe Joseph Smith found it. But anyway.
Was that
Scott's? You should see Scott's face. He's like, he has zero sense of humor this morning. But there are prophets and books.
Not the jokes.
Yeah. There are prophets and books that precede Islam that were in their primal form Islamic. It's just they've been corrupted in different ways, whether it's the text has actually been corrupted or just the understanding of the text. And then the last core belief is that there will be a last day, a day of judgment. Anybody who would describe themselves as a Muslim, minus like these kind of heretical aberrations, like think Nation of Islam, with I think Louis Farrakhan is still heading that thing up, which is very much it's a blending of like black nationalism, some Islamic beliefs, alien kind of cosmology, and it's bizarre. And then there's a group called the Ahmadis or Ahmadiyya that would be outside the pale of Islam. But if you find yourself amidst a Muslim, even if they seem secular, because maybe they drink alcohol or something, I'd be willing to bet. Scott knows I'm not a betting man because I'm cheap, but I'm also wise. I'd still bet on it because I'd win. Those are the 5 core beliefs that stretch across the different Muslim dispositions. Secular Muslims, though, there are. I mean, I don't know that a whole lot of Muslims like that term, but there is a long debate that goes back over a century about the relationship between Islam as a theology and Islam as a like political legal polity. That doesn't mirror, but kind of parallels, say, like Christian, the 2 kingdom kind of theology. Like what role should Islam play in the state? The long tradition does not make those distinctions, but in the modern age, Muslims have started, putting forward different conceptions of that. So you can find what we would describe, or what you described as secular Muslims, who still maintain a theology, but are quick to keep the legal principles of Islam from bleeding into the state if it's not a Muslim majority state.
All right.
Can I ask like a quick follow up with that?
I don't know. It's going to count as your next question, but go for it.
No, I don't want it to count. That's fine. I'll leave it be. Ben.
I'm just kidding.
Wow, he just deferred to his dad, as he
okay,
should.
Adam. If they leave the legal, I like the addition you make there, or that like in a non-Muslim majority. But for most of them, you're saying though that they would probably, you can't really speak for individuals, but that in a sense though that those laws they believe would be best for everybody, or best for themselves even, but that there's just not, in the world, there's not an enforcement mechanism for making that happen if you're not in a Muslim majority country.
Yeah, that's a good way of thinking about it. But I mean, everything's complicated, right? And I hate when I even find myself saying in response to a question, well, it's complicated. But it really is, because you have, especially among Western Muslims, who you could describe as Quran-only Muslims. And so for them, the Sharia law, this thing we hear about, this comprehensive law that legislates everything, which is built from what's called the Sunnah. That's like the biography of Muhammad, the Hadith, and other traditional Muslim writings. That doesn't factor into how they think about living out their life as a Muslim. It's the Quran and the Quran alone. So, I think that probably the thing that helps us understand how is it that there are Muslims living like in America who aren't really interested. Like Zuhdi Jasser would be one big example, who's kind of led the charge in warning Americans about what we might call Islamism, like this real serious ideological form of it. Is up until, say, it's before World War I, but let's just say as a marker around World War I, maybe stretching back to the 19th century, the question began to be raised whether or not Muslims could permanently reside in non-Muslim majority countries. Up until that point, the answer is not permanently. Because if you don't have a sort of a legal apparatus that reinforces the proper Muslim way of life, there's going to be all sorts of distractions and temptations and so on. That doesn't mean Muslims haven't interacted in non-Muslim societies over the course of history. They have, in fact, as diplomats, as traders, merchants, and so on and so forth, but you could not do that permanently. If I remember correctly, there was one exception. If you're a Muslim who's involved in dawah, that is calling non-Muslims to Islam, then you could, like a Muslim missionary, you could. But that was the one exception. Then when the Muslim majority world starts to fracture, and after World War I, after the caliphate is abolished, this 1,300-year-long institution that held Islam together, and then you get the Kemal Ataturk leading the charge for a secular Turkey, where he's abolishing headscarves and defunding madrasas, Islamic schools and things, in an effort to institute a new like secularism, then all of a sudden the question becomes real live. Like where is like the domain of Islam now? Where ought Muslims live permanently if you don't have a caliph, you don't have that place? So think of when ISIS was around, 10 years ago, and you had that real nasty guy, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Do you remember him? He claimed himself to be caliph. If you've got in like a real traditional classical view of Islam, if you have a caliph, his responsibility is to ensure the integrity of Islam and Islamic civilization. And if you've got a legitimate one, you're then, if you're living outside that territory, you're required to migrate there. Now, the issue with, and so you did see people who were moving to Syria and Iraq under al-Baghdadi. It wasn't a whole lot, but they were because they felt compelled to per like traditional Islamic law. The big issue there, though, was like, why didn't every Muslim move there then? Because he wasn't seen as legit. He was like, just because one proclaims himself caliph doesn't make you a caliph. But so now the big thing is, and here I'm yammering on, but I'm going to give me a couple more minutes here. I think this will be helpful. The Tariq Ramadan, who was once referred to as the Martin Luther of Islam, he was born in Switzerland. He was given a chair at Notre Dame University back in like early 2000s, the professor of peace studies. And as soon as he packed up his home and made all these arrangements, the U.S. State Department let him know that he wasn't permitted in the U.S. because he had given money to a so-called charitable organization that was buying rockets for Hamas. But he wrote this book called Western Muslims and the Future of Islam, where he grapples with the idea that since there is no like caliphate, there is no properly ordered Islamic state or empire, what does that mean for Muslims today? And he argued that Muslims today, now wherever they live, whether it's in America, Iceland, or Australia, or the Middle East, should see themselves living in the domain of Shahada, the domain where Muslims are to testify or confess the quote-unquote truth of Islam and work at reinstituting an Islamic order wherever they might find themselves. And that's kind of helpful in thinking about how Muslims might see themselves in Western countries, and you actually see quite a lot of evidence of this where they and in a place like America where you got the First Amendment rights, when they're going about doing their things, they have every right to do their thing. And what you'll notice is that they're especially interested in promoting their particular values in the society they live in, and sometimes they'll dress down those values a bit so that they seem like they're commensurate with Western values, right? So, like, I remember the Fremont School District in the Bay Area of California years and years ago outlawed the cooking and distribution of pork products in the public schools because there are so many Muslims in those schools, and it would taint, would make things haram and so on, and that seems like maybe like a small little thing to help out like a large Muslim population. But from a Muslim perspective, that's a little bit of an advance, a small little win for Islam. Is it threatening? I mean, depends on how you look at it, I guess. If I go further, I'm going to get into wild
the only thing that's interesting about it is
that
and maybe it's hard because in Western society was so Christian for so long and is influenced by it. So then you get Christians going like, well, why isn't the school district bending towards Christian needs?
Yeah.
Well, for most Christians, there aren't specific dietary Christian needs. So then when you have fewer laws, it's harder to, enforce those laws. Like there's what dietary law are you going to try to have on a school district?
You're infringing on my Christian belief that all food is permissible.
You'd have to present it like that. So we'd have to start presenting like freedoms that Christianity grants us as necessary to our lives, and maybe we should. I'm just saying Christians tend not to do that because they're, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a lot of issues
for so long.
What's that?
What
All
did you
right,
say?
we have time for one more question.
Okay, good, because I wanted my turn. So Adam, I've been trying to think about how to ask the question I have, so it might come out more jumbled. But Islam means submit or surrender, right? That's kind of the
Mhm.
meaning of the term. In Islam, what makes you get to heaven? I want to say the word salvation, but maybe there's a difference because I know, like I've heard people, the book might get into one of the lower levels. Is it the 5 pillars? Do you have to do the 5 pillars? Is it ethnic? Is it a belief in something? I've
It's a
heard stuff about
jumble.
like there's scales, at the end of the day, there's like scales. I've
Mhm.
also heard, if you get martyred, that's a guarantee. I've heard lots of different explanations about how you get right with Allah and can have assurance of
Yeah.
salvation. And I think the only one I've heard that you have kind of full assurance is martyrdom. But then there's others where you can be like really, really confident. That's
Yeah.
my
And
understanding. I could be
by
wrong on that.
martyrdom, we're not talking about being killed for your confession of faith. We're talking about participating in a struggle, a jihad to defend the integrity or advance the cause of Islam. So it's a different conception. But yeah, so the Quran is all, I shouldn't say all over the place here, but there you get lots of different kind of explanations of this question in the Quran. And you're right, the Quran says when the Shaheed, I think it is, the martyr dies in jihad, it's such an honor that as they enter paradise, they'll like petition Allah to go back and do it all over again. And there is this picture in the Quran that's the one guarantee of paradise is dying in the path of Allah. You also get this picture. You mentioned scales in the Quran that at the end everybody will be judged on the basis of their good and bad deeds. And there's this old, I don't know how widespread it is still to this day, but there's this notion that over the course of every human being's life, that every good deed is being recorded on one scroll and every bad deed is recorded on another scroll. And depending on what is heavier or longer, I guess, will determine your fate.
That's like how every secular person leads their life.
Yeah, it's like a ledger.
It's like, hey, I just try to live my life so that the good outbalances the bad, man.
So that's what I mean. Interestingly, that's the way. Like on college campuses, you got like Muslim student associations and things like, or these Caleb mentioned online. You get these advocates for Islam and so on. Some of them will try to dress down Islam so it doesn't have like an Arab flavor, if you will. It seems more like a moralistic therapeutic deism kind of thing, But back to the salvation question, I talked about these 5 core beliefs of Islam. There is a 6th that's mentioned in Orthodox Islam called the divine decree that effectively is a doctrine of predestination or determinism that says your fate is already determined regardless. And so the question then is, well, what's why would anybody then, why should people be held accountable for their sin? It's because those sinful acts that you do are created as if you chose to do them yourself. I mean, it gets into real like serious, double predestination is an anachronism for Islam, but that, it's already determined. And it is not determined whether you do the 5. I mean, if you want the best hope and you're not dying in the cause of Allah and jihad, you want the best, you want to be as certain as you humanly can be that you're going to paradise. It's to fulfill those 5 obligations, prayer 5 times a day, pilgrimage to Mecca, fasting during Ramadan, paying zakat, and confessing the shahada. But even then, you can't be sure. I had a young lady who was toying with, and I think did convert to Islam for a bit because her boyfriend was pressuring her years and years ago, dropped off at my office by her dad, who was a pastor. And he asked me to talk with her. And I remember
Man, that'd be like, that's such a hardcore situation to be in.
This is I think she was maybe 18, very intelligent girl. I asked her, I was just trying to, as you know, Scott and Bruce and Caleb, I'm not the best person to I don't have a whole lot of tact. but I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to figure out what's going on here. And so I had asked her questions like, why are you thinking about, or why have you left Christianity and thinking about Islam? And I kid you not, her first response was, well, I grew up reading the Bible. Then I started reading books on the Bible, and I found out that the Bible is filled with errors. And
oh my gosh,
referring to and in fact, she quoted almost verbatim that famous sort of paragraph from Bart Ehrman's Misquoting Jesus, that there are between 200 and 400,000 variants. And so if this stuff has been changed, what else has been added to or taken out of the text, and so on and so forth. But then as we continue, I'm doing all this apologetic stuff with her. And then finally, after I think we had talked for about 2 hours, I said, you've read quite a bit on Islam. You've read the Quran. You know that you cannot be certain of your salvation in Islam. Doesn't that bother you? And her answer, it really kind of took me back, was, it doesn't. Allah has already determined that for me. And I'm like, yow.
So she was, by the time she got to you, she was converted.
She was, yeah, I think she was there. I mean, again, I'm no psychologist. Just like I have no business being a pastor, I have no business being a psychologist. It was pretty clear that it was just pressure from the boyfriend. And when that relationship dissolved, she left. But she had already kind of made up her mind, but she hadn't been out about it, public about it at that point.
Oh.
Yeah, so, she was in, but not officially. But she's now, I know her father, and she's good. So that was like 15, 20 years ago.
Is she out? I mean, she's good. She's out.
She's not a Muslim. She dabbled with agnosticism, I think, for a while, and now is, from memory serves me correctly, now a Christian. Again, a Christian.
Well, thank the Lord.
Yeah.
My goodness.
I tell you what, though,
but Adam,
over the years when I was like intensely interested in all this stuff, and maybe a little bit too much, I was tracking stories of, in particular, Lutherans who were embracing Islam. And I remember distinctly a article from a newspaper from Texas, interviewing a woman who described herself as once a confessional Lutheran who'd become Muslim. And she pointed to the way Islam treats women, doesn't, or what the expectations for how women should behave in Islam she found more attractive, meaning she didn't have to wear certain dress. She could dress modestly and so on. So, but if you describe yourself as confessional Lutheran, that's kind of interesting.
We'll let women dress modestly all day long.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. But
it's like nothing's stopping you.
Well, what that told me is that, I don't think that this is the case, but, sometimes I err on this sort of rational thing. I think people actually, if they take their beliefs seriously, and what that tells me is that people hop around to whatever suits them, sadly.
That kind of thing's always funny to me. It's like, this religion encourages me to be more faithful. Like, absolutely nothing is stopping you from being more faithful in this faith either.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, you dig a little in all this stuff. There's always something that's not a evidence-based logical reason. It's social pressure, it's experience, and so on. And yeah,
a lot of it's piety too. People get
if you show up
attracted by that.
conservatively dressed to an LCMS church, no one's going to look at you and go, "Wow."
Well, I agree.
I can't believe your skirt's that long.
With what Bruce was saying,
it's a contrived answer,
is like
right?
Yeah.
Well, or to I think we can underestimate that. You could do that in Christianity versus the structure that people are often looking for, which is, this has told me how to live my life. And you actually hear that when people convert to Eastern Orthodoxy as well, which is there's all sorts of devotional things you could do as a Lutheran that are the same as the East, that are adiaphora.
Some organizations might even provide some of those devotional things.
But it's the demand even if it, I guess in
I
some
know.
ways
The
isn't
heart,
a
the
law
heart
for
of man inclines
salvation.
towards the law, and so
Yeah.
everybody wants to be told how to do X, Y, or Z. I just always think it's an interesting excuse for leaving Christianity, or a form of Christianity that's more gospel based. It's not like the gospel based forms of Christianity are telling you that's the way to salvation. They'll still all give you sort of all of the moral teaching and precepts of the Bible too, that um, that you absolutely can and should follow. And it's just interesting to me. People want to figure out a way to earn their salvation in whatever sense. That's why I said the Muslim is, if the answer that Adam gave here regarding sort of at the end of the day what equals salvation is no different than what the secular person who's trying to quote unquote be a good person thinks. He
Yeah.
hated my answer so much he just left.
He just left. Well, we got lucky that Adam's connectivity issues didn't really totally affect this episode. If you're looking for more on this or less on this, Adam and I are doing a 15 minutes or less of Islam. I actually still have questions about Islam too. I have questions
I do
about
too. If in your 15-minute video, can you ask him specifically about jihad, like struggle?
Maybe we should do a follow-up eventually, because like I have questions about what he was getting to with Sharia and these added texts. Because did you notice how he tells all these stories? He'll be like, there's these conflicting stories of who was really crucified instead of Jesus. I'm
Yeah.
curious where those texts are, and like how the caliph is decided, like how is their papacy or their ecclesiology decide
Sounds
what's
like it's a little
truth.
Yeah, you just kind of pop up and say you are.
Yeah, so I have lots of questions about that too. Like, if there is this sacred, indisputable text, why does Islam have so much speculation about the events within the text that like are just totally like narrative stories? It's definitely interesting. So I'm sure Bruce had a list of questions too, but
I have so many more questions. Yeah.
and then maybe what we can do too, like, I mean, it's hard because you don't want to get too political, but I think that the social ramifications, or the question of like, why do Christians? Because I feel like one of the frustrations is Christians feel like Islam in the United States or Muslims in the United States get a pass on like behaviors that are anti-Western or especially modern secular Western that Christians just don't get. Like, you just don't hear, and it's anecdotal in some way, but complaints about the way Islam treats homosexuality
Or
women or whatever.
I mean,
right?
like the politicians showing up on TV with their required head coverings, talking about how Christian society is oppressing women.
Yes.
Well,
And
so
so-
Muhammad was a prophet. He was a leader, a political leader, and he was a soldier. And Jesus was none of those things. So, not only a prophet, right? So, in Islam, the marriage between church and state, or mosque and state, is indivisible, and the ability to go to defend your faith with violence if necessary is also, I mean, Muhammad demonstrates this, right? He does all these things. He's a political leader as well as a soldier. So that complicates things. Like, it's hard to not talk about politics when you talk about Islam, because they talk about politics when they talk about their faith. It's part of.
Well, that's
the
why I want to
example
know about
Muslim.
jihad, because jihad, it seems like the struggle is either brought about, like in America, the struggle is political, right? It's cultural, political, and happened. He was even talking about that thing in Fremont, California. This is a political move, right? And I'm sure this is seen as part of the struggle.
And it always happens coincidentally too. Like that was in the same news cycle as like, like certain schools saying you can't pray out loud before your lunch. It's like, what is, and that's why I think there's a level of shell shock here where it's like, you're saying Christian kids have to be careful about even the way they pray over their meal in certain school districts, at certain schools. And then at the same time, whole menu changes are being made because a religious group needs them to be. So I do think there's a lot about this, and probably worth our time to get into, even though it does, like Bruce says, it naturally comes up against the political. So I do think there's probably a necessity to talk about that a little bit too. So when Adam reconnects and we have time for another episode, we'll do that. So we thank you for listening or watching this episode of the Thinking Fellows podcast. And don't forget to go over to YouTube as well, just even the general 1517 YouTube, to see those in 15 minutes or less videos and some of the other content that we're putting out there. We're putting a lot of energy there. So there should be stuff for you to enjoy and learn from there. We thank you for listening to this episode. We will catch you next week. Bye.
Bye.